Good morning, Year 4. Welcome back for another week of English. And you can see this week in English, we're moving on. We're going to be writing a completely different style of writing this week. We're going to be writing some poetry. Amazing persuasive adverts last week. Well done. Really loved the vocab choices that you were making. And to be really persuasive, you really had to think about the words that you were putting on the page. So we're going to be applying that learning this week because that's exactly what poetry is. Poetry is purposely choosing words on a page without really having to worry about too many rules. But the reason that poets write poetry is to try and create an image in the reader's mind, and we call that imagery. Okay, and all of the poems that we're going to be looking at this week and the poems that you're going to end up writing by the end of the week are going to do exactly that. You are going to create an image in the reader's mind from the words that you choose to put on the page. Okay, today's lesson is focusing on the different techniques, or I'm going to be calling them tools, okay, in this lesson, because we're going to be thinking about what things is it a poet has to do in order to write a really good poem. What sorts of things do they put on the page and why do they choose them? Okay, so we're going to be focusing mainly this week on vocab. Okay, the words that we choose. However, the layout of our poem is also going to be really crucial as well. And you can see I've chosen a poem here. I know that in Year 4 you guys always do your best, which is why I chose this as a poem as an example. But without even reading the words on the page, I can see just from the way it's been written, the layout on the page, that this is a poem. Because you can see the rules of writing a poem is completely different to the rules that we use for doing a piece of non-fiction writing or perhaps a story piece of writing. So I know each of the pieces of writing that we've written over the last few weeks, there's always kind of a set criteria of what we would need to do. So think back to last week when we wrote our persuasive adverts. The first lesson in last week was when we were thinking about what things a persuasive advert needs, the features. And that's exactly the same as a poem. A poem needs to do certain things as well. And you can see from the layout, just without even reading it, that I can tell that this is a poem. I can see that there's a title. I can see that the lines in the poem are written underneath each other, and I can see some of the lines of the poem are grouped together. So I can see 4 lines here in this first verse of my poem, and they've been grouped together. And the reason for that is to try and create a little bit of rhythm or a little bit of order there. Okay, and you can also see that some of the lines are quite short lines. Some of the lines are quite long lines, okay, but they're written underneath each other and each line starts with a capital letter, okay, even though the line before it doesn't end in a full stop. So you can see at the end of best here, there's no full stop there, but there's still a capital letter at the beginning of that line, okay, and that's a really important layout feature that we're going to be thinking about. And you can see once we've got a group of lines of poem in the poem together, we've then left a little bit of a space to create a new group. Okay, and there's no rule as to how many there needs to be. You can see there's 4 lines in this one and there's 6 lines in this one. Okay, so this week the main focus, as I've said, is going to be on the words that we choose, okay, and how we can best order those words in order to make it like a poem. However, we're also going to need to think about the layout in order to make it look like a poem on the page as well, okay? So, as I said just a moment ago, we're going to be thinking about the things, the tools that a poet needs to use. So if we think about this as an image here, I want you to imagine that this box is the poem, okay? And the poet has to fill this box with all of its tools in order to make the poem complete. Now, I know that you will have looked at poems before. I know you looked at lots of poems when you were in Year 3, and I know that you've written your own examples of poems as well, okay? In fact, when we think back to our Beowulf unit, that was a poetry unit, and we talked about lots of the things that the Beowulf poem had, okay, the tools that it needed. So I want you to think back to all of that previous learning, and I want you to think, what tools do I know that a poet needs to use in order to make a poem a poem? What needs to go on the page? Let's have a think. Okay, rhythm might be one of the first things that you thought about. I've used the word rhythm already in this lesson, haven't I? And as you can see, one of the tools in order to make a poem complete is that the poet has to create a fun pattern to make it easy to remember. Okay, sometimes you might be able to think of the beats in a word, in a line, in a poem. Okay, and that is often linked quite closely to the word rhythm. So we think about perhaps the beats in the line, or we think about the length of the poem. So if I go back to this poem here, I can see that this first verse has a bit of a rhythm, because I can see it's got a shorter line with a longer line, a shorter line with a longer line, and that's created a pattern. So we call that a rhythm. We could also think about the beats. Okay, if you always try your best, if you always try your best, then you'll never have to wonder, sorry, my mouse was in the way then, about what you could have done if you'd summoned all your thunder. Okay, so you can see it creates a little bit of a rhythm. Okay, the beats in the lines. Can you think of any of the other tools that we might use? Yeah, you're right. Rhyme. Rhyme is often used in poems, and I'm sure lots of the poems that you've read in the past rhyme. So what do we mean by rhyme? Yeah, it gives your poem a musical feel to set it apart from the text. And we can identify rhyming words when the end of the word sounds the same. We had a good practice at that in our Beowulf unit, didn't we? And again, if I go back to this poem, I can see just in that first verse there was two rhyming words, wonder and thunder. Okay, because the end sound in the word, even though it's not spelt the same, sounds the same. Wonder, thunder. Wonder if you can spot any other rhyming words in this poem. Be, me. Okay, say, today. So the end of the word sounds the same, and often rhyme is used lots in poems. What else can we think about? Yes, we've done lots of this year already, haven't we? Alliteration. Alliteration is another really common tool that a poet will use in a poem. And we know that that's when words start with the same sound together. Okay. When we did our Beowulf poems, we thought about how we could describe Grendel using alliteration. And I know lots of the examples of things like gruesome Grendel, perhaps, okay, or bewildering beast, perhaps, okay. Lots of different ways to describe something using the same letter at the beginning of the word, okay. And our final tool that I know that you guys have already used before in the past are similes. You will have looked at these when you were in year 3. So what is a simile? It's when we compare something to be like or as something else. So you'd see the words like or as in the sentence. And in fact, we used some similes last week, didn't we, in our persuasive writing? Some of you said that the person applying for the job needed to be as wise as an owl, or perhaps as brave as a bear, as cunning as a fox. So when you compare someone or something to be like something else, okay, using like or as. So those 4 tools are things that when we put them together in a certain order on the page, we could be creating a poem. And the other one that we've looked at this year already, which is a very typical Roman, Anglo-Saxon and Viking tool that they will have used in those sorts of poems, are kennings. And again, we've looked at those recently as well, haven't we? We know a kenning is when we're using 2 words to describe something without saying what it actually is. You thought about this when you were thinking about the Viking weapons. So we thought about Starkad's sword, didn't we? Leg biter or skin slicer. Okay, thinking about two different words to describe something without saying what it is. So that's kind of filled up our toolkit already, hasn't it? Now I've chosen a poem here that I think you're going to enjoy. Okay, so I want you to have a read through of that poem in just a minute. You'll find it on the Google Drive, and you can just pause this video as well to be able to do that in a moment. And while you're reading through the poem, I want you to think about each of these tools that we've just talked about here. Okay, rhythm, rhyme, alliteration, and simile. And I want you to see if you can find examples of each of those tools in this poem. It would be great if you could highlight it. Okay, so if you could show your understanding of those features by highlighting them. Okay, I wonder how many you can spot. So pause the video now, head over to the Google Drive and see how many you can spot. Okay, welcome back. How did you get on? I wonder if you've spotted the same ones that I have. Let's have a go together, shall we? So we can see the poem is called Spinners, and I can tell from the pictures that it's about a spider spinning a web. Okay, so again, looking at the layout, I can tell this is a poem. It's got some short lines, it's got some longer lines, and it's got some even longer lines there. And we can see every single line has that capital letter at the beginning. Some lines end in a comma, but there's no real rules about using punctuation in a poem, which I'm sure lots of you will be happy about. So let's have a look at this first line together. Secret and swift, describing how those spiders move. Secret and swift. Oh, it's hard to say. Yeah, you're right. That is alliteration. So we can see that those words have been chosen because they both start with the letter S. Okay, as light as lace and small. Can you identify what poetic feature that is? You choose a different colour as a clue that it's a different poetic feature, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. As light as lace. That is a simile. Okay, because we're describing something to be like something else. So the spider is as light like a piece of lace. The spinner rakes my garden from wall to wall. Okay, so the spinner being the spider here. Foreshadowed caves between the stones, and leafy holes within the ledge. A guttering tunnel, dark and damp, an empty pot on a window ledge. I purposely read all of that together to try and create that sort of rhythm. Okay, so we can see here, let's do that in blue. I can see here that rhythm has been created because we've got a long line, a short line, another short line with another longer line. Okay, so it's trying to create the pattern. Two long lines separated by those two shorter lines. Okay, so a little bit of a rhythm. But I wonder if you were really clever and were able to spot another feature. Rhyme in there. Yeah, you're right. Well done. Hedge and ledge, because the end of the word sounds the same. Okay, so already we can see that this poem has included all of our features from our toolkit. I wonder if we can see any other examples. Each greyish, brownish, blackish place is laced with threads too fine to see. I have my secrets, Spinner says, and waits expectantly. A spider is a stealthy thief, scuttling away from view. She can't be seen so easily, hiding away from me and you. So hopefully you spotted some other examples there. I know I certainly spotted some other examples of some alliteration. Brownish, blackish, chosen together there. Dark and damp. Okay, I'm sure there was lots of other rhyming words as well, and some examples of some more rhythm there too. Okay, so there's one particular line that I'd really like to focus on next with you, and that was the line, a spider is a stealthy thief. If we go back in the poem, we can spot it. It was almost towards the end here. Okay, a spider is a stealthy thief. Now I'm purposely highlighting this in a completely different colour to what we've chosen before, because that is a very different poetic feature, but it's not one that we've talked about. I wonder if you know what that is called. A spider is a stealthy thief. Do you know what tool or what poetic device that is? This is when it's saying it is something else. It's not like something else or described as something else. It's saying it is something else, even though it's not. So we call that a metaphor. Okay, and that's going to be our new piece of learning today. And today we're going to be thinking about having a go at using metaphors ourselves. Okay, so as I've said already, a metaphor is a type of phrase that's used in a poem. That's when something is described as being something else. Okay, so I've got the two videos here that I want to show you, and I've popped the links in the Google Drive as well, so you can watch them again for some other examples a bit later on, okay? But they are both videos which are talking about using figurative language, and that sounds really posh, and basically what that means is when we use words to try and create a picture in the reader's mind, okay? So very similar to all of those things that we've been talking about already. But these videos will explain to you exactly what a metaphor is, and it will give you lots of examples. So while you're watching the video, you're going to hear lots and lots of examples of metaphors. You're also going to hear a little bit about similes as well, which we've already talked about, okay? Because metaphors and similes are very, very similar, but it's important that we don't get them mixed up. Okay, so what I want you to do in a moment, you're going to see both videos. We're going to see this one first, okay, and then we're going to watch this one afterwards. And I want you to jot down any of the metaphors that you really liked, okay? And I want you to see what rules they follow, okay? So enjoy.
Figurative language devices. Figurative language uses figures of speech to be more effective, persuasive, and impactful. Similes. Similes compare one thing to another using the words like or as. As cold as ice. The classroom was buzzing like a beehive. As sly as a fox. Metaphors. Metaphors compare one thing to another without using like or as. My teacher is a dragon. She is a shining star. You are my sunshine.
Big crowd in tonight, Jeff.
Including Bob the superfan. Bob here has never actually seen Jess perform.
Let's help him picture her in his head. We can use metaphors and similes. Okay, so a metaphor is when we say something is something completely different to help someone understand more about it.
So for Jess, we could say,
She is a star. Whoa! Not an actual star, Bob.
or we could say,
She is dynamite.
oh, he's done it again.
Bob, not real dynamite. For similes, we use as or like to compare one thing to another.
So for Jess, we could say,
She's as fast as a cheetah.
or,
As graceful as a gazelle.
well, today it's powerlifting. Oh, that's bound to hurt.
Maybe we should have mentioned she's as feeble as a mouse.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed those videos, and I hope that they have helped you to understand a little bit more about what a metaphor is, okay? Because that's going to be the focus now for the next part of our lesson. I've provided some examples of metaphors here for you. I'm sure you might have heard some of these being said to you before. Your room is a dump. It's not really a dump. Okay, it's not really looking like this. It just means it's a mess. Okay, so we use a metaphor to explain that it is something, to give a little bit more information about something. Loneliness is a dark room. Okay, is another example of a metaphor, and I know that you've definitely heard this one before. They are busy bees. Okay, it's perhaps when we're talking about you guys as children in the classroom when you're working really, really hard. You're not really bees, but we're saying that you are busy bees, so that's an example of a metaphor. Okay, so I've got a bit of a challenge for you now. In the Google Drive, you'll find this example. I want you to have a read of each of the different phrases that have been used, the figurative phrases that have been used on these clouds, okay? And your decision is to decide, is it a simile or is it a metaphor? Now, you could colour the clouds in a certain colour, so perhaps all of your simile clouds might be red and all of your metaphor clouds might be blue, for example. You might want to just add an S or an M to your clouds. It's completely up to you, okay? But I want you to have a read of these, and I want you to decide whether each of those clouds is a simile or a metaphor. There are the answers on the Google Drive as well, so once you've had a good go, make sure you do check the answers and mark your work to see how you get on, okay? So pause now and have a go. Welcome back. How did you get on? Could you identify some of those similes, some of those metaphors? What did you have to do to know the difference between them? Hopefully these tools here helped you to see that. So we know that a metaphor is telling you when it is something else. So perhaps you might be looking for the word is to help you. Or a simile is using the words like or as. So again, perhaps you might be looking for those words within those phrases to be able to help you. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that activity. Your final activity today then is to have a go at writing some of your own metaphors. You might like to write them in your own clouds, like the ones that you've just done, or you might like to do them in completely different shapes, or just write them as sentences. That's absolutely fine. I want you to have a go at writing your own examples of metaphors where you're saying that something is something else, to give us a little bit more information about it. I popped some pictures here as a bit of a guide to help you if you're stuck, but you don't have to do metaphors for these pictures. You could come up with your own ones that you know of as well. But if you are stuck, you might like to use these as a bit of inspiration. So often when we're feeling a little bit sad, we might say that we're blue. Perhaps you could use that as a metaphor. We know that our lives are full of ups and downs. Okay, perhaps a roller coaster. We know that lightning and thunder, a fierce storm, might be a lion, perhaps. And as a final challenge, there's that spider again from that poem. Now, there was one example of a metaphor in that poem, wasn't there? A spider is a stealthy thief. I wonder if you can come up with your own line for that poem using another metaphor to describe that spider. Good luck. I can't wait to see them. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.